Hi, everyone. My name is Jibby Saetang. I'm a security researcher at Microsoft and the Ghost team. Ghost is our threat hunting team, so I identify and hunt for advanced threats to Microsoft. In addition to that, I am also a volunteer with the KC7 Foundation, where I am a threat intel content lead. And that means that I get to make really fun and immersive games for people to play to learn cybersecurity. Um, I see some familiar faces in the crowd, and you probably know me as the watch repair person. But for everyone else, prior to working at Microsoft, I worked in watch and jewelry repair for about a decade. I had no previous IT or cybersecurity experience. I played this game that we gave to these kids, and that's what inspired my cybersecurity learning journey and took me all the way to my job at Microsoft.
And hey, I'm Bryan. I've been an educator for about 13 years. For 11 of those years, I also was very uninvolved with cyber. I was an English teacher. I worked with the Department of Education and various educational cooperatives to bring innovation into the classroom through gamification, project-based learning, and technology. And I got really tired of getting paid or not getting paid to do everybody else's tech work. So I got another degree and immediately was given the spot of cybersecurity instructor. Um, that was great because nobody knew what I was teaching and neither did I. So it was really easy to slide right into that role. Um, but about a year ago, I was introduced to this game, KC7, and I introduced it to my students kind of as a way to fill in some time while I figured out what I was doing. And from there, I was able to get the most difficult audience to captivate in the world to give a crap about something that is so complex that it blows my mind to this day to be able to tell you guys about it.
Go on.
There you go.
All right.
Hot take from Jibby here.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm gonna say some stuff that's gonna be kind of out there, and I think a lot of you are probably gonna disagree with me, and that's totally okay, right? Feel free to shake your heads, feel free to boo, because I know that lunch is after that, after this. So like, the louder it is, the longer I will talk. All right, first thing I'm gonna say, boot camps are just not cool. What do boot camps and that guy over there have in common? Does anybody know? Unoriginal, right? Irrelevant, right? It's just a bunch of old rehashed kind of topics, kind of ingest it, and then you don't really care about it, right? It doesn't resonate with people, right? It's not for the culture, right? All right. The other one, tests, right? We tell people that we work in these really cool jobs, right? Cybersecurity is a cool job. We get to track, right, and disrupt threat actors. The coolest thing in the world. Somebody says, oh, wow, sign me up. How do I do that? Well, here are a bunch of flashcards. Go take some tests. It's like the opposite of what we do. It is not cool, right? All right. The next one, I'm sure everybody's gonna disagree with me on this one. Entry level certs are just not cool, right? Not only do you have to take these tests, you have to pay like thousands of dollars to take these tests. And the thing that's not cool about that is that people are afraid of messing up because if you don't pass the test, then you have to pay $1,000 more to take it again, right? And so we're promoting this culture of like people who are new to cyber, right, coming in and they are afraid to give the wrong answers instead of people who come into the industry who are empowered to ask the right questions instead.
So as an educator, I used CompTIA as ITF Plus to get my ninth grade students excited about cybersecurity. And it did not do that, actually. So while trying to gamify cybersecurity, I had more drool on my floor than good marks on tests. So it was really difficult for me to find value there. So students just really want to see something fun, and it ate most of my budget. So I couldn't really afford those things that were fun. So as an educator for the last 13 years, I've realized and didn't think I should apply this to cybersecurity, but then did, student interest. If you can engage somebody in something that they really already love, then learning becomes much easier from that point on.
All right. So what is cool, right? Fun is cool, right? Games. How many people in here play games for hours and hours and hours, right? You can play a game, right, with very minimal instruction to get started, right? The more you play the game, the better you get at it. You learn as you go along, right? We all have been there where we are playing a game, we get so immersed in it, we know we have to wake up early tomorrow to go work, but just one more hour because I'm almost there. I'm almost gonna pass this level, right? And then some games even bring stories into them. And that makes it even cooler, right? Now you get to play this character. You get to go on these adventures. You get to save the world through a game. And it feels awesome, right? Well,
Well, my students think cybersecurity sounds really cool, so they sign up for the class. And then after the first day, when I tell them that they're not going to be hackers working for the FBI in a week, they kind of turn the other cheek and they hate me a little bit. But uh, they will play games all day. I have students coming into my class saying, "Oh, I didn't go to sleep until 3 o'clock because I was playing Call of Duty." But why? Like, it's the same thing over and over, which is kind of like education. There are stories involved in a lot of the games they play, and they're willing to be somebody else. They're willing to fail over and over. So gaming and gamification is really what I've pushed for in education, to make students care. So I teach in the largest school district in Kentucky. It's Jefferson County Public Schools. There are 97,000 students. And in Jefferson County, we have 160 different career and technical education pathways, or CTE programs. My school specifically has 1,400 extremely diverse students. There are 28 different languages spoken in my school. There is a lot of diversity and a lot of students coming from homes that don't necessarily have affluence. So getting them engaged in education is pretty tough when maybe they haven't had a meal that day. But in my school as well, there are 8 CTE programs, and cybersecurity is one of those. When students hear cybersecurity, it sounds really cool to them, but again, the class just doesn't click at first. In my class, students can get 7 college credit hours. They can get a certification every year. And as I mentioned, CompTIA's ITF Plus was given to my 9th graders last year. It will expire before they graduate. So there's not really a ton of value in that. And that's the issue with high schoolers. They are very short-sighted anyway. They don't see value in anything other than what is here and now. So to say, hey, this will be pretty relevant to you in 4 years, they don't care. They are also extremely dopamine driven. So if it's not on their phone, if it's not bright and flashy, and I know that sounds cliche, like I pull my phone out in the hallway over there and have a pretty good time on it, but they need something to grab their attention. Traditional education just isn't doing that anymore. And the world's hard. Why do you want to go into a building for 8 hours a day and be told that something is going to be too hard for you? So when things do slow down and things get difficult, they are very unwilling to persevere through those things. So when I switched to cybersecurity education, there were some pretty major hurdles that I had to jump over. Technical material, as many of you have known, taking your certification tests is not super exciting. It's just not. I'm sorry. I took the test. I wasn't like super jazzed after I did it. When I taught English, I was able to build up the stories that they were reading around them. I made them immersed in the world of 1984. They had to survive and compete against each other with Lord of the Flies. But when you get into cybersecurity, I mean, I could have locked them in my server closet, but there's probably a lawsuit or 2 in there. So the practical application was something that I was sorely missing. But when I was teaching code, I would watch students struggle with lines of code for days at a time. They wouldn't do that writing a single sentence, but a line of code where they knew that there was an outcome, a product that they were going to create. They were so excited to struggle through that. Then IT help desk guys, taking apart a computer, telling somebody what's wrong with it, they got their hands on it. So I got a bunch of my fellow teachers to give me computers, and I broke them, and I put them all around the class, and I told students that they needed to act like an IT help desk employee or a customer with a broken computer. They went nuts. They put on accents and postures to tell people what was wrong with their computers. They got excited to run through the troubleshooting model. Why? because they got to play. So as I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go next in my class, it's query language, primary keys and foreign keys, which I know sounds so exciting, but to 15-year-olds, it's not. So I give them this game where they can log on and take on the role of a threat analyst. And they find an intrusion, they hop in, and they search for data. That doesn't sound super cool until you're in it and you are solving it. You are part of a story and you're actually making a difference. And so that role playing and that gamification, students saw themselves on a leaderboard and were willing to struggle through something because they wanted to beat their friends. And it also taught them to ask the right questions, which is a huge hurdle in an education classroom. So my students started being okay with making mistakes. There was less fear around the idea of making mistakes, and all of that hesitation that comes with writing a paper and it being wrong just dissolved. They wanted to mess up, and you would hear students around the room saying, "Hey, I just solved this, let me show you how to do it," because they were becoming experts at what they were doing. While they are looking at a leaderboard, I'm listening to them become more and more technical every single day with the things that they're saying. They are collaborating. They are falling into roles in the classroom in ways that they would have never done if I had just assigned them those roles. Additionally, every one of these stories that they were playing with this game is based off of something that really happened. So while they're playing, they are connecting the dots with things that are actually happening in the real world. They realize that giving out all of their PII is probably a bit of a risk. They notice that ransomware that affected 2 million people in our city is a real thing, and they wanted to figure out how to prevent that from happening. So we got rid of the idea that there are questions that are stupid, and we just plowed forward with messing up and having fun doing it.
Cool story, bro. But like, what is
Right?
this game, right? What is this game that these kids are playing? Well, who works at a company that captures log files, right? We all look at log files. So K27 is a company, right? And we generate log files, right? We have employees doing employee things, right? We have network traffic, we have endpoints, we have employee email records, right? And then within that log file, well, within those logs, right, we bury a threat actor. A real threat actor with real TTPs comes and attacks this company, right? And then your job is to go back through the log files, find the evidence, and reconstruct that attack and tell us what happened, okay? How do we get people to look at log files? Well, we create a story, right? And we have a guided question set that leads you through the intrusion. So each question that you answer takes you one step closer to finding the solution to the whole problem, okay? And what does this have to do with threat intelligence? Right? We're all here for a threat intelligence conference. What does that have to do with it? It's not like bots or any of the other platforms where it's like you play one game and you're done. Each one of these builds on each other. And so the deeper you get into the game, the more you have to start really thinking about adversary behavior. You know, you have to start tracking TTPs to be successful. You have to understand like business context. So the game is much more than just being a security analyst. As you play this game, you will develop like the threat intelligence mindset that'll make you understand the bigger picture and the bigger implications behind cyber attacks. Beyond just looking through the data, right? We bring you outside of the data set, and you go and enrich your data out like on the open web. What is that? That is intelligence, right? And you bring that intelligence back to kind of further drive your investigation further.
So with these stories, my students started to care. And I saw some pretty crazy things happen. Students started making their own mind maps without me asking them to. Students were keeping track of these investigations as they went. They were profiling threat actors. These are 14-year-old kids. Like, they're gonna go home and play some Fortnite and come back to school the next day and eat their hot Cheetos and tell their friends that they're stupid. But they were doing work that blows my mind. So when they started to really go above and beyond, they were presenting these things to their classmates to say, hey, here's how I figured it out. Let me help you. And that's kind of where I realized that we should evolve a little bit. So that was just us playing a game last year. This year, I restructured my entire cybersecurity program around this game. There are 100 students in my program, which maybe isn't a ton, but that's a lot of teenagers to get to care about something. So I started taking the context of all of the modules and stories that I was giving these students, and I started filling out all of the work that they were doing. So they were introduced to actual ransomware attacks. They were asked to think about the ethics behind whether or not to pay a ransom. They had to learn encryption because an attacker is going to use encryption and they need to know how to decode it. So as my students are taking these case summaries and attribution reports, they are doing work that actual Microsoft employees are doing. These Microsoft employees are zooming into my class and telling my students how they could improve. And the students are asking for feedback. Like not just, yeah, cool, bro, but like actually taking the feedback and improving what they're doing. So that storytelling that they're involved in is causing them to actually understand. They're part of something real, to the point that they start looking at the world from a little bit of a different perspective. I use a program called Infinite Campus. It's a learning management system in schools. That's where I take attendance, that's where I put in grades, that's where I can literally find out an entire life story of a child, down to the medicines they're allergic to. So the students, knowing this, say, hey, what kind of information do you have on me? Who has access to it? What can an administrator see that you can't see? So I show them. I open up Infinite Campus and I search the kids, and they see that I have social security numbers, I have addresses, I have phone numbers of their friends, not their friends, their siblings.
Wait,
I do
what?
have phone numbers of their friends, but you got to pivot a little bit to get there. But these kids then start talking to administrators about the vulnerabilities in the system. I had a bell ringer where I asked students a bunch of seemingly innocuous questions, and then at the end of it, I was like, hey, what's your mother's maiden name? And like, at this point, they're like, what? But they started sharing it. And every one of the questions I asked was a question that would be on like a bank identity verification survey. So when the counselor came in to get them to sign up for scholarships, they wouldn't provide her with any kind of information whatsoever. I've messed them up for a very long time and probably ruined their futures. But these same kids are now looking on MITRE ATT&CK. They're reading DIFA reports. They are trying to figure out other actual attacks so that they can see what's happened before and whether or not anybody's actually considered this type of thing.
Oh man, okay. So, I said that I worked as a threat hunter and I worked in watch repair. One thing that I'd never done before was taught high school kids. So then one day Bryan comes to me and says, I need you to help my kids build one of these games. I was like, no way, it's too hard. Okay, you can't do that. But I remember like when I first started my KC7 journey, on the website there was this banner and it said anyone can do this. And I would see that every day. And then eventually, one day I believed it, right? Anyone can do this. And I became somebody who could do it. I mean, when I played that game, I didn't think I could stand up here in a stand summit and talk to anybody, but here I am. So this game pushes you to be able to do a lot more than you think you can. So I thought, well, let's take a chance and let's see what they can do, right? So trying to think back about how do I teach kids with no educational background? Well, I do have a small child. And so I remember this book that I read a while back, and it was about 2 ways that you could raise a child. One is like as a carpenter, where you can kind of like really shape them and kind of try to define the way they come out and have this like predetermined outcome. And the other one was like a gardener, where you kind of gave them this like healthy environment, gave them what they needed to grow, and then just kind of let nature take its course. Curiosity, exploration would kind of be the ones that guided their learning. Well, I have no idea what like a high school aged like CTI analyst looks like, right? So I'm like, okay, I cannot be that carpenter. So I will just do what like Simeon, Greg, Wayman did for me. And they gave me this great environment where I can learn in and I could just kind of explore and then become like my own like analyst. And so I built them a little CTI garden. right? I started with some soil, like I gave them like, hey guys, this is a safe space. You could ask me whatever you want. I will not judge you because I don't know what I'm doing either, right? We're gonna figure this out together, right? And then a little light, right? Here's the direction that you're gonna go in. Little by little, here's the direction. A little bit inspiration, like read about the groups that might be relevant to you. Like, look at this young group of people called lapses. They're like young and they've done a lot of like pretty like gnarly attacks, right? They were like, oh, that's so cool, right? You get like you get kids to read about like a threat group and they think it's cool. I mean, that's pretty amazing to me, right? Okay, then some water. You know, I check in on them. How are you doing? Where are we at? How can we keep going? Just kind of encouragement, making them feel good about what they're doing. Okay. Now we have like, stuff growing, but it's kind of going all over the place. So I needed like a trellis or some structure to give them, and that came in the way of like frameworks. Let's look at the cyber kill chain, right? Let's build our attack chain, right? What's the attack path that the attacker takes? Where does he start? Where does he go? How does he get there, right? Then we started introducing MITRE ATT&CK, and they started playing with that. But it really started to click with them when I gave them the diamond model. That's when they got all the little details and the pieces together, because they can really kind of visualize all the parts that they needed to fill in this data set, that when you played the game, you could actually pick up the evidence and pivot with it. I remember when I first gave them the diamond model, and I gave them very, very little like direction. I spent 5 minutes writing, this is the diamond model, this is what you have. And they would just read it and go. And then they would write like a Google Doc of what they thought and then send it back to me. And they got it wrong. They were like, the infrastructure is the school that is getting attacked. And all I said was, oh, no, the infrastructure belongs to the adversary. Now, I live on the West Coast. These kids are in Kentucky. We're like, I finished my day at Microsoft pretty late. It's probably 11 midnight there when I sent that out. And within minutes, I see somebody updating the doc. Like they were up working late. All right. How many people have people at their company who do that? Like, I'm gonna just stay up and work for free at night. You don't, right? Like, you don't really see that. And that's what these kids were doing. So as we were building this game, you can really kind of see that they were like really getting invested in it and they were going above and beyond. And it's because like I think earlier we saw there was like a threat group called Lockbite, right? Yeah. It's a character, right? We saw Barry Schmelly, it's a character, right? The game is very character driven. And these kids had become so invested in the characters that they had built that they wanted to keep driving this story forward. Now, we talk about resilience. We talk about when things get hard, what do? You know, do you crumble and you run away, or do you like rise to the occasion? We made this game by accident much harder than we needed to on these kids, okay? Simeon, this is on you, right? So in order to make the game, you build this attack, right? You build your threat actor, and then we throw it into this Python engine. It generates all this random data, okay? Hundreds of employees. This is like gnarly log files that you have to go back through now. And then you have to reconstruct this intrusion, right, to build the question set. Now, typically what we use is our config files, which is like our Intel report. It has the IOCs, you know, it has everything the threat actor does so that you can go back and find it on your own. Well, first of all, we gave them these things and didn't tell them how to use it. So they just had this raw data set they had to blind hunt through, right? So I meet up with them 2 weeks later. I'm like, well, you know, where are we at? Where have you guys gotten? Nowhere, because Simeon didn't explain how to do it. I was like, okay, that's no problem. We'll just get started and I'll find you the config and you can finish it off from there, right? So like most people be like, oh no, like this is gonna be too hard. How do I do this? I've never done this before in my life. I am not a professional. How am I supposed to go through all this data and find this stuff? And I just sat with them, right? Nathan, the hunter. Yeah. And I just said, all right, you guys are now my Intel team, right? I know nothing about this intrusion. Give me an IOC, right? And they came up with
Xenorat.
Xenorat. Okay, Xenorat. How do we find Xenorat? Where would we look for that? And I would just guide them. And then, oh, well, let's check like file creations. And we find it there. Oh, now what's the next pivot? Whose machine is this on? How many machines is this? And they kind of just went from there. And they just kept building it on their own.
This inquiry-based method of education is what every teacher really dreams of. And like we actually had something for them to work with. I even had one of my students that was looking for possible elements of the story and found a line of code that she could insert into the inspect element, and it allowed her access to our learning management system that she shouldn't have. And then she came up to me and like begged me not to like get her in trouble for it. But if anything, I was impressed. These students were wanting to raise awareness of what was going on because one of my students shares a name with a principal in the district. And this principal is supposed to get lots of very sensitive emails, but it happens that Bryan gets those emails pretty frequently. So he saw that as an opportunity to build the story from there. And they wanted other people to see just how easy it would be for all of these students who have done nothing. They didn't put this information out there. It's just there because they're in public education. They wanted everyone to know, hey, this could happen very easily. And since we started building this story, that's actually happened. So I'll leave that there. But the students were finding this research themselves, like Jibby said. I could guide them, I could encourage them, but like he said, they would go home and work and beyond what I had planned for them to do. They were ready to care about something because they felt like they were a part of something. So they developed their sense of independence. As he said, Nathan is my threat hunter. I've got a student who doesn't even want to go into cybersecurity, but she found that she is an incredible leader. They also learned that they did not know everything. They hit walls several times, but they were actually willing to ask for guidance. Like we want students to raise their hands and ask questions in the classroom, but a lot of time teachers literally set aside time to say, do you have any questions? And it becomes this artificial feeling in the classroom where students are only speaking in order to pacify us. But here, they worked until they couldn't go any farther, and then they sought guidance. And that is something that is wild. We also learned a little bit about time management because
Yeah, because we're running. Yeah, we had some lessons that we had to learn. One of them is that we have 4 minutes left, so we can move a little faster here.
Time management, baby.
Yeah. Okay. It was pretty tough. To teach them like that. You can tell a story, but you need data to tell that story, right? We work with evidence, and our evidence is log files. And if it doesn't exist, didn't happen, right? And so that was one of the things that we really had to hammer home with them. Another thing that I just thought was funny was that they had no concern about OPSEC at all. Like they did not care that the threat actor would be caught. Like they were just like, hey, cool, he wants to do this, and I just had to run with it because that was their idea. Should we just?
Yeah, let's just go.
Let's move on.
These are my students. They care about very little educational things, but they see a future because they have created something. They wanted to teach other people that you can accomplish really difficult stuff. You just have to care about it. And by immersing them in these stories, they found that they cared about something. So I took a subject that is wildly complex and had somebody come in to help me, and we made a bunch of teenagers care.
Mm-hmm.
So
what does that what does that mean to everybody in this room? I'm sure nobody's gonna go out and go teach high school there, right? So why does that matter?
we need teachers though.
Right? Because CTI tells a story, right? And once you get somebody to buy into that story, we learn you can make them do whatever you want, right? You can make them do the hardest possible thing for free, right? And they would be happy to do it, right? So you can take this idea. What are the stories in your communities or in your companies that you can tell to leadership, to your teams, that can get them invested into what you want them to do, right? You can use this game if you want. You can show them what it looks like, right? But it is about building those stories and those connections, like person to person, and things that they care about. And once they find that it matters to them, then they will do it.
And when an administrator walks into my classroom, all I have to do is be like, software, and they're like, you're doing a great job. But when a student will stop them and say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this story that I'm investigating, then the administrators care. They want to hear more about CTI, which I apologize, JCPS, for what I said. But there is some pushback for what we're teaching them, but there's also a lot of interest and excitement about what we're teaching them. So,
yeah, good.
Take it to the
Questions?
next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
What questions do you have for
Yeah.
us?